fellow developers, writers, and everyone who loves game design.
Welcome to DLC Not Included, our weekly podcast where we discuss game development, the industry, and everything in between.
We are your hosts, Steele
and Teal. Glad you could join us.
I hope everybody is having a fantastic, absolutely fantastic day. It is cool, almost cold Sunday evening here in South Texas.
And we are very happy to be bringing you our podcast.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. For those of you who are watching live, please hold your questions until we get to that point, because this one is going to be very, very in-depth. What are we going over today, Teal?
Today's topic is environmental storytelling.
Now, this is something that we have gone over in many podcasts and many forums before. We have been over this a lot in a lot of our content.
Yeah, we've touched upon it, but we haven't actually done a deep dive into it. So that's what today is about.
Right. You can always catch those other podcast forums if you want to learn a little bit about, us talking about it and how important it is. But today, like Teal said, we're diving into how to do it.
Yeah. So what is it in a nutshell?
Yeah, what is environmental storytelling in a nutshell? Let's give the actual definition. This is the one that's defined by places like GameDeveloper.com, the GDC, that kind of thing.
I want to give the definition.
All right, go my definition, girl.
All right, environmental storytelling. It's the art of arranging deliberately selected objects within a game world that the player can interpret as meaningful, furthering the game's narrative. How was that? Was that good?
That was literally textbook. Yeah, like Teal said, it's the art of arranging things that the player can interpret and usually moves the game's narrative forward. So basically. You'll also often hear people describe the arrangements of things in a scene as Nissan Scene, which is a term that is used actually in stage production, which is where this came from.
That's where I've heard it. Okay.
Yeah, Nissan Scene. So people lay it out. So literally in environmental storytelling, you're laying things out.
Okay.
But there's an in a nutshell definition that I find is a little easier for people, especially new developers, to kind of swallow. Yeah. And that is the end result. So environmental storytelling is the end result of a scene that you didn't actively unfold in front of the player. So when you walk into an area and you see the result of something and they didn't see it unfold, that is in a nutshell what environmental storytelling is.
Right. So for example, you walk into a room and all the furniture's turned over and there's a mess on the floor.
Right.
And you're like, whoa, what happened here?
What happened here? Yes. That is probably the best way to describe it. If you're saying what happened here, you're probably dealing with environmental storytelling.
There it is. Yeah.
Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go over a 4-step process to doing environmental storytelling in your game. This is not the only way to do it, but it's the way that we've found over the years to be very efficient and also really easy for, again, new developers to understand.
Right.
There are entire courses. The GDC gave a fantastic presentation over it. You can actually download in the description of this VOD. And the environmental storytelling Game Maker Forum VOD. You can actually get a link to the GDC, their PowerPoint presentation for the presentation on environmental storytelling. It is really good and highly technical. This one's going to be a little bit more layman terms.
Yeah, just to get you started.
Right.
So the very first step.
Yes.
Let's talk about the very first step. Is you, the developer, need to play out the scene as if the player will see it.
Right, because as we mentioned in the nutshell definition, they're going to see the end result. That's what they see. Yeah. But you in your head have to play it out as if you were going to unfold it in front of the players. Literally storyboarding.
That's definitely the word I would use. Yeah. Storyboarding.
Storyboarding, one of the most important things you can do.
What that means is you're going to draw or draft everything out and create that chain of events.
Right. In other words, if you've never actually storyboarded before, the best way to handle it is to take a piece of paper and just write down, like pictorially, and it could be stick figures, what has happened in the scene. So let's say you have those overturned pieces of furniture. You can have it be like, maybe it was a fight. So you could have person A walking into the scene where person B is. Then you could have a panel where they're duking it out, or one pulls out a gun. And I mean, it could be dorky stick figures because you're playing it out in your head.
Right.
then, one of them kicks the other one over the sofa. It knocks over the sofa, but now you're saying, hey, wait, there was a table with a vase next to it. Maybe that table with the vase is knocked over.
Right.
That kind of thing.
And the vase kind of rolls. So, yeah.
You're creating the chain of events is the best way to describe it.
So let's talk about that vase rolling thing. That's part of what you do to take notes of the impact. Okay, because there's going to be impacts to your physical objects and the surroundings. So you need to take note of all those impacts.
Right.
So when the table falls, what objects on the table are going to fall and what are they going to do? They're going to roll, they're going to bounce.
Right, are they going to break? Because if they break, then you have to take that into account that there's going to be like a spreading shard of vase glass. So these are things you have to do. And you do want to go as macro as you need. Like, let's say that you're dealing with a room that is the result of a tornado hitting a house or a neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
You actually want to take a step all the way back to the neighborhood that was hit by the tornado as you kind of write down all those variables. Because you might actually find that as you're doing that, there's a beam from another house that entered into the living room where the event takes place, where the player will see the environmental scenario.
Right.
So, you want to go out really macro. So if it is something that is going to affect a neighborhood, go out and actually draft and write down how the whole neighborhood was affected, the impact. And then you can kind of zoom back into the micro for the one room you're in or whatever you're doing.
Exactly. But it's going to affect everything.
Yeah.
Hey, the passage of time. That's very important.
Yes, it is very, very important.
You want to take into account the passage of time. You want to add or subtract any of these elements as needed.
Right, because that busted vase, that busted vase, it could, over time, maybe wind and rain washes some of it away. So instead of it being that perfect spread pattern, it's a little bit more chaotic. There's more entropy. Let's say that part of this devastation that took place in this room busts a fish tank. Well, if it's been a while, the water's evaporated and the fish are dead and maybe they're even bones.
Yeah, bones.
Things to think on.
Dust, dirt, cobwebs.
All that gathers. Yes, all of that gathers.
Dust bunnies.
It all gathers. So you want to take the passage of time into account.
Yeah.
Are you doing something like in Fallout, where it's hundreds of years after the bombs have fallen? That's going to give you a very different look than if it's a few days after the bombs fall.
Yeah.
Superstructures have had a chance to collapse more. Steel girders have had a chance to rust and bend through and
shift, with the elements.
So it's not just a matter of devastation, it's devastation plus time. And if it's really long, like let's say like Horizon Zero Dawn, then you're going to see the flora taking over that area.
Exactly.
So you want to take that into account when you're rating the sequence or this scenario.
And remember, it's perfectly fine if you put way more into this drafting of the scene than the player will ever see or figure out.
Yeah, basically.
It's okay.
Remember, we've said this before in other podcasts. We've said this before in forums. You want to make more than the player will ever see. Because there's things in your world, whether it be your world lore, your story narrative, your character motivation. Like the players don't know that the barkeep, when he was 16 years old, witnessed a murder, and that's why he always carries a hammer with him. They just say that he always has a hammer.
Right.
Same thing with environmental storytelling. They don't need to know that the vase that was broken actually happened to contain the ashes of, one of the people that lived in the house's ancestors. They just know there's ash there.
Right.
So these are all things you can draft and put way more info than the player will ever see. And I think that's going to kind of move us on to our next step, which is what?
Okay, step 2 is you want to create the level that contains the scene, but you want to create this with certain factors in mind.
Right, and this is where it's going to start getting really technical. So we'll take it slow, and if you have any questions that need clarification, please ask them if you're part of the live audience.
Right.
The first thing is showcasing, okay? You want to showcase the physical properties of the world in which this scene, scenario, etc. is taking place. And by that, we mean the physical properties are static mesh placements, actor placements, which actors don't have to be people. In a game engine,
they don't have to be.
In a game engine, an actor is anything that would have code attached to it.
Yeah.
That could maybe ragdoll or have joints. It's a catch-all term for things that are not just static meshes. They're called actors.
Right.
So
maybe a table fan that's spinning.
That would be an actor. Yeah, that would be an actor. So what you want to do is when you're creating this scene, this scenario that you're telling your environmental story in, you want to showcase the physical properties so that it pulls people into the world. Let's go back to our devastated living room. Okay. So, for example, you want to showcase through the material that the sofa is made of. You know, if it's made of, let's say the game takes place in the 1950s. That's when this thing happened.
Okay.
That material of that sofa and the frills on that sofa are going to look very different than if it's something modern.
That's correct. In the 50s, it was made out of some kind of woven tweed canvas material, and you had fluff in it, like actual fluff.
Exactly. While nowadays you would have something more along the lines of just a cloth, maybe even a twill or something like that, a tweed.
Yeah, and foam cushioning, some kind of a polymer foam.
Right. The fan, I love the fan idea. If it's like in 1950s, it's going to be this big, huge, rotating thing on the ceiling with these massive blades, you know, that's moving very slowly, maybe even creaks a little bit.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like the stuff we have nowadays that, you know, can move silently, have 5 blades,
or
5 lights attached
and more
to it.
efficient,
We're looking up to where in the studio right now, our ceiling fan. They're going to look very different.
Yes.
So what you want to use is you want to use the visual and to some extent the aural, but the visual impact of those pieces, those static pieces and those actors, to tell the physical story of what your world is so people get pulled into it.
Yeah. So while you're also doing that, keep in mind your boundaries of your space.
Because the player needs to see the sequence. They need to see the scene.
Yeah.
You know, even if it's an open world where they can stumble upon 2 teddy bears playing chess, they still need to be able to stumble upon it. And if you have that locked away behind closed doors, behind a bookcase, in a place that is utterly inaccessible,
then no one's going to see it.
Right. It turns from environmental storytelling to an Easter egg.
Yeah.
You know, and Easter eggs serve a different purpose.
So you definitely want to have a path there so you can lead the player through the environment.
Right.
So they can see the story that you're telling.
And remember from our wayfinding, both forum and I don't remember if we've done a podcast on wayfinding, but we've definitely done a forum.
We have done a forum.
Wayfinding is guiding them through without directly pushing them. It's giving them visual cues, aural cues, views, and vistas to guide them. So in this instance, maybe the way they enter into this devastated living room forces them to see the view of the sofa and the busted vase. Yeah. They can't not see it if they're walking through the doorway, you know, and, you know, so players may sweep to the left. They may sweep to the right. So you make immediately to the left and immediately to the right of the door, not as eye-catching. Right. So that when they enter in, if they're looking to the left of the door for maybe an enemy, all they're going to see is like a boring room, a boring corner with wallpaper. Yeah. They look to the right, they're just going to see more wallpaper. Nothing really interesting, so they're going to look forward. They'll see your thing that you want them to see. Exactly. Then at that point, if they choose to look away and not absorb it, it's on them, not on you. So,
you know, and a great thing to do, I'm just really adding on to this, is after they see that thing that you want them to see, there's an open doorway right past it. So then that leads them to go through that open doorway.
Exactly. Wayfinding. And while you're doing that, you're creating a sense of the player being a part of the scene. They're not just a spectator, although they are observing. Sure. They are participating. They're moving through it.
Yes,
they're
they are.
Experiencing it. And that's very important to the next point of step 2, which is defining their identity.
That's right. You want to do this through the entire environment.
Right, not just the scene.
Not just the scene.
The best way to describe this is if you're playing a game like Skyrim, you're going to feel like a blacksmith or a knight or whatever because you're walking around old medieval fortresses, that kind of thing. If you're walking around in Fallout, you're going to feel like you're a survivor of a nuclear war because just by seeing these devastated buildings, just by seeing these, you know, torn up luggages, these skeletons, these teddy bears playing chess, just by seeing all this stuff, the player is going to immediately identify as being a part of that by being a survivor of a nuclear war.
This is stuff that you used to do back before the bombs. You used to play chess. You used to bake cakes. And then you walk through here now, and the mixer is all busted and turned over, and the chess table is being taken up by 2 busted up old teddy bears. You're like, I'm the only one now. I'm the only one here.
And that is a very good point Teal just brought up. because she's talking specifically about Fallout 4. And in Fallout 4, they juxtapose that with the prologue. Say what you will about the prologue. When you're walking around your house talking to your spouse and you're seeing how the world was before the bombs drop, you're only in there for about 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, tops. Yeah.
And then you are in the devastated world. And because you saw what the world looked like pre-bomb drop, you have that feeling that Teal's talking about as you're walking around the Commonwealth. My world is gone.
Yeah.
This is all I have. This new world of devastation is my world. While if you're playing a game like Fallout 3, for example, your world is just the vault. So you start off in that vault and it's very different from the rest of the world. So using juxtaposition, using alternate points of view that are very stark, really, really helps. But you can also use the ones that are concurrent and add to mystery. The beginning of BioShock.
Yes, the beginning of BioShock's a good example.
Jack crashing, he ends up in the water, and he's got this feeling of water all around them, creating, I think it's agoraphobia, the fear of open spaces.
Yes.
This massive agoraphobia. You don't want to go into the water because you know you're going to die, because you drown. You go to the lighthouse, you go into the bathysphere, and then your world just shifts.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same thing. It's water. There's no difference. There's no juxtaposition of, going from the sky and going down to the water, or the other way around, like in BioShock Infinite, where you literally go up in the clouds. No, with this one, your water, more water, but it shows this new world, this submerged kingdom, the submerged universe. So you're creating player identity in this. And to kind of build off of BioShock even more, when you go out and you see the New Year's Eve gone bad, and you see all the splicers and all this shit, you get this feeling of alienation of, I'm a normal, quote unquote, person who's walking into this absolute insanity.
Yes.
So that's another one. And this will lead us to the last point. And this one is very gameplay oriented.
Yeah.
And it's called affordance.
Let's talk about that.
Okay, you want to communicate affordance. What affordance is association of an object with a game mechanic.
Okay.
For example, in Skyrim, if you see a barrel, you instantly know there's food in it.
Right.
Because the first few times you see a barrel and you open it up, there's apples or potatoes or whatever.
Yeah, and on the same token, not just in Skyrim, but maybe in Fallout and other games, whenever you see a safe, that means gold, it means money.
Money, right. So like a cash register
in
Fallout 4 and in BioShock, you're going to get money.
Right.
What you want to do is when you're creating the environment for your storytelling, you add in the gameplay mechanics into it. So not only are you showing them this amazing scene, not only are you showing them something that breathes life into your game narrative without saying a word, you're teaching them the mechanics of your game world by cleverly just placing items there.
Yeah.
Maybe going back to the destroyed living room, with the vase and the turned over chair, turned over sofa. Maybe in there is a record player.
Oh.
And they go to the record player and it's relatively intact and they start playing it and it plays a song and that song sparks a memory in your character. Now you know that phonographs and music are going to bring memories of whatever your character is.
Right.
So you've created and enforced a mechanic. So that is why when you're creating the level containing the scene, you want to have these factors in mind. You want to have showcasing the properties, using wayfinding techniques to communicate boundaries, defining player identity, and communicating affordance to the player.
Yeah, that's
very
it,
important.
nutshell.
It's not just taking items and throwing them at the ground and calling it environmental storytelling.
That's not environmental storytelling.
We should probably move on.
Okay, so step number 3. You want to create the scene itself within the constraints of our previous step of creating the level.
So you've created your level.
Yeah.
Now you're going to create your scene.
The actual scene. Okay.
Right. So you're going to first take all of the objects, all the actors and statics, and you're going to place them as they would appear on your storyboard's last panel.
Right.
Because remember, environmental storytelling is basically the end result of a scene the player didn't get to see played out.
So that's exactly what you're going to be doing.
Right.
So for our busted up living room, after the tornado went through it, right?
Or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
Whatever devastation occurred.
Yeah, whatever devastation occurred, then you're going to create that busted up room.
Yeah.
You're not going to create a room that has all the furniture in their place and an intact base. You're going to have all the busted stuff and things overturned.
And if your storyboarding is good enough, as you place in items that may not have made it to your storyboarding, you're going to automatically take the physical impact of the event into account.
Mm-hmm.
So you have your vase with the ashes and the busted up pieces. You have the overturned couch. Oh, wait, there was a fishbowl. Okay. But you automatically already know that like a giant beam came through the room and bashed everything up. Yeah. So now you can account for the fishbowl. Those are the kind of things that are important. And that leads us to the next point, which is accounting for tangible impacts.
Yes.
To the level and the room.
So perhaps gold scattered across the floor, some kind of money.
I like that. Like, let's say you have your safe that's busted open in your fantasy world.
Yes.
Because a dragon came slumping through.
And so then that safe is going to be kind of broken with the door on a hinge, and the contents of the safe will be thrown out into the floor.
Right. And you account for the physics of that. So if you don't have a simulation that lets you spill it out automatically, you're going to be manually placing gold. And that's okay.
That's okay.
Good level design takes time.
Yeah.
So things like that, the couch over, the fishbowl, everything that we just mentioned. Right. It could be something like trees knocked over in a certain way. It could be something that's not necessarily disastrous. It could be something positive, like let's say a blast of real powerful holy magic went off in a room and everything is kind of now sparkling because there's residual blessing in the air. It doesn't have to be a physical devastation. It can be anything. It's just easy to describe physical devastation.
And let's not forget about the passage of time either, because if your player is going to walk in there and it's just much time later, many years later, whatever.
Right.
Any plants that are in that room are going to be just dried up dead things. Similar things with, let's say, leather, any kind of material. It's going to be rotted.
Yeah, there you go.
Just kind of ratty and rotted.
Stone that's been worn down. Let's go the positive route for a second with a hard passage of time. So you have an abandoned castle.
Okay.
And the abandoned castle has become weather-worn. The floors have gotten rotted. The wooden floors have gotten rotted. The stones have gotten worn with mildew. I mean, it's just a crappy-ass place. But in one of the rooms, the holy super bomb of, the super being appeared and wholly blessed everything by its angelic appearance maybe about 2 or 3 days ago. So when your character arrives, the rest of this castle is in disrepair, but the room in which the holy being appeared has been reconstituted and looks fantastic.
So it's pristine, looks brand new.
Yeah. Maybe time magic or whatever, something like that. Yeah. So it juxtaposes and then it creates the question, what happened?
What happened here? Every
time you're using environmental storytelling, the end result is for the player to go, what happened? And to gain a deeper appreciation of your narrative.
Yeah.
Now remember, that even if it's 2D, you want to do this thing we're about to say, but if it's 3D, you have to do this, and that is...
multiple angles.
Yes.
You want to have a view from multiple angles so that the player can get a clear picture. Even if the player is never going to see those angles, you need you need to bake that in there.
Right.
Every angle you need to look at and account for. Because you don't know if the player is going to go over here or go over there.
Right.
You don't know that.
And even if the boundaries keep them from going over there, the world itself still had an over there.
Yep.
And something happened. So one of the things that new developers do a lot is they focus just on the extreme close-up area in which the player is physically going to go.
Yeah.
There's an entire world. The world is not what the player sees. The world is in its entirety.
All of it.
So when you're making your scene, and this is in 2D, but especially 3D, you need to consider every possible angle and you need to check every angle.
Yeah.
Now, you can still use your techniques of using meshes to hide things, of not showing a place. Like if the player's never going to see behind this rock, you can have part of a twig sticking out because it's, part of the bigger tree mesh piece, and the player's never going to see this little mistake back there. That's fine. That's level design tricks.
Yeah.
But you still want to view the sequence from every possible angle.
Exactly.
Now here comes the fun part. Step number 4, where we take what we just taught you and turn it on its head.
Yes. Because now you've got to do all of this everywhere throughout your entire game.
It is a massively common misconception that environmental storytelling is only used in certain parts of a level. And that is not true.
No.
Environmental storytelling should be every part of your level in every part of your game. Now, those scenes that we're talking about, turned over couches, busted vases, spilled gold, chess playing teddy bears, those are played out scenes, quote unquote, that you still want to do. You still want to apply all the steps beforehand because it tells a certain part of your narrative.
Yeah.
But your whole game and every part of every level should be lending to that. Your level should be more than just what a player explores. It should be what they experience.
Yes. So the entire level needs to be involved in this.
Yeah.
The entire level needs to show your narrative.
Whole thing.
All of it.
Whole thing. Yeah, you still do the played out scenes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Start to finish, everything. And honestly, this is where the magic comes in. Okay? This is where the magic comes in.
Yeah. Players should not realize that you're doing this.
Right.
They should just feel the results.
Right. So if your player doesn't realize that you've applied environmental storytelling metrics to everything, and they're just feeling this post-apocalyptic world, this high fantasy, castle, this under the sea ruin. If they're just feeling it, then you have succeeded as an environmental storyteller.
Yeah.
All right, now it's time for us to take questions from our live audience.
If you've been watching, remember to use the podcast question feature in chat.
Now, while we're waiting for our live audience to hopefully ask some real good questions, I want to talk about my favorite game, environmental storytelling, and we mentioned it.
Sure.
That's the original BioShock, and we talked about it in our forums. I love Bethesda's games. I love VR games. But I've still yet to see a game that uses environmental storytelling from start to finish as good as the original BioShock.
They did it right.
They did it, everything. Every single thing. So honestly, if you've never played it, I would highly recommend playing it, especially if you want to be a level designer and you want to focus on any kind of environmental show, not tell storytelling.
Yeah.
Start to finish. But what are some other ones we really like?
Well, I personally love the teddy bear thing. In the Fallout games.
That's Fallout 4, right?
Fallout 4, because the teddy bears seem to be randomly placed, but they're actually not. Okay. They're actually very cleverly placed. The game designer and me just started hunting down teddy bears, and I started thinking, okay, who put the teddy bears here?
Right.
Why did they put the teddy bears here?
Right.
What are the teddy bears doing?
Yeah.
Why choose that?
Yeah.
And also, follow up with that, when were the teddy bears placed?
Yeah.
Because some of these teddy bears are pretty clean. Yeah. Honestly, they're clean. They're free of cobwebs. Others have got cobwebs on them. It's like they've been there for a very long time.
Right.
So you begs the question, who did this and why? To really do a bigger deep dive into it, there's an army facility, and the teddy bear that's there is dressed like an army sergeant with the cigar and everything. Okay,
Big Boss Bear.
Big Boss Bear. But then I go through a medical facility and I see a frightening scene of a teddy bear, three teddy bears approaching a teddy bear that's laid down on a gurney, and they're carrying shot needles.
Yeah.
How frightening is that?
It's almost like these teddy bears were placed by someone or a group of someones who are attempting to mimic the world as it was and the world as it is. Paying homage to just the twistedness of this post-apocalyptic world. I find that to be fascinating.
It is very fascinating.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Bethesda, they are masters of environmental storytelling. They do a lot.
There's a lot of flaws they have, but environmental storytelling is one of their strengths.
And speaking of Bethesda, their books or their journal entries.
I want to mention that real quick. A lot of people think that journals, you find journals or computer terminals with emails on them, they think that's environmental storytelling, and it's not.
Right.
Those are basically exposition.
Yeah.
Those are cleverly disguised walls of text.
Right. And they are a better way to do it than a wall of text or info dump.
Absolutely.
Because you make them optional. So you get a book in Skyrim or a journal entry or a terminal entry in Fallout. You don't have to read it, it opens up the world more. So if you have to do something like that, that's actually not a bad way.
No.
But that's not environmental storytelling.
No, it's not.
Environmental storytelling would be a ruined book being opened by a teddy bear and the teddy bear reading it with little glasses.
That's it. That's a good example.
That's a good example. And again, that's still encroaching more into Easter egg territory. But an Easter egg is just a fun piece of environmental storytelling that gives a player a giggly moment.
Yeah, and it's cleverly hidden.
Cleverly hidden, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we do have a question.
We have a question from Burke. Burke says, can you please elaborate on how environmental storytelling is not lore? The requirement on how it must affect the immediacy of the player action and the like. I tend to react violently to games and scripts that mix up the two.
Yes, environmental storytelling is not lore, but it can be used to impart the knowledge of lore. The biggest difference is this. Environmental storytelling moves the narrative forward by allowing the player to make assumptions based on what they're seeing.
Yeah.
They fill in the blanks themselves. That's environmental storytelling. Lore is information about the world, the people, the meta, whatever.
Yeah.
So you can use environmental storytelling to teach lore to the player, but they're not even remotely the same.
No, they're not the same.
Like Burke says, the requirement on how it must affect the immediacy of the player. Yes, a player will react immediately to seeing something in the environment.
Yeah.
Even if it's not interactive, they'll get the immediate pull. You walk into that living room we were talking about, you're going to immediately have a emotional reaction from the player.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, let's say that this was their home prior to, this was their home in the prologue.
There we go.
And it was fine. And their wife and children were walking around having a good time. They were getting ready for the holidays or whatever. And then you walk through the scene and it's absolutely devastated.
Yeah.
That's going to invoke an immediate emotional reaction inside the player.
Mm-hmm.
The lore has nothing to do with that, but you could communicate lore by having that vase hold the ashes of your dead great-grandfather who fought in the Second World War. That would be a lore piece communicated through the storytelling.
That's a good example. Yeah, so, I like that.
Yeah.
I hope that answered your question, Burke.
Yeah, that is a very good question, Burke.
Yeah.
We'll see if any others pop up before we move on. We can't stress enough how important this is. This is a very important aspect of game design.
It is a key component to immersion.
Yes.
And immersion is all about keeping the player invested in your game, keeping them playing.
Because the immersion is all part of the UX.
Yeah.
Which, when we went over the first podcast this season,
we
could not stress enough how important the UX is. And honestly, everything we've talked about since then has built off the foundation of the UX.
Yes, it has been. Because it's that important.
It really honestly is. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions. Before we end it, I do want to say thank you for those who are listening to this live. You are always fantastic. We do go back and read the chat afterwards.
Absolutely, we do.
So if anyone was saying anything happy hoopy, we'll catch it afterwards. If you're listening to this on VOD, whether it be iHeartRadio, Spotify, Amazon Music, etc., we thank you as well. If you think of questions related to environmental storytelling, please hit up our Discord.
Yeah, we are always checking it. We're happy to answer questions. And the folks that are on our Discord are also game developers. So they can help with your questions.
There's a lot. And when it comes to environmental storytelling, there is no one right way to do it. It is finding the technique that works for you as a developer to communicate to the player.
Yes.
So if you join our Discord and go to our, I think it's the Writing Workshop channel, you can ask questions or propose ideas, and people will happily offer feedback. Our server is a feedback-driven server.
Yes, it is. We're here. Our server's here to help all of us in the community.
Absolutely. So we want to thank every single one of you who are listening to us live, VOD. We're going to head out and enjoy the rest of our Sunday evening. But remember, join us next time for DLC Not Included. And everyone, remember,
anyone can give you the key, but you have to go through the door.